Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about the Lizardmen, one of the races that do actually need a rework in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And if Creative Assembly were to do a DLC where they were to rework Norska and the Lizardmen, it would actually make sense, because for Norska you could do Skeggi, and for the Lizardmen, well, honestly, I don't really have a lot of ideas, because the Lizardmen already have a lot of their characters and heroes as legendary lords in the game. This is a race that has a ridiculous number of legendary lords in Warhammer 3. They've gotten free paid DLCs, 2 free DLC legendary lords. So you might think that, oh, surely the Lizardmen have gotten a lot of love and attention. Well, not quite. Because what Creative Assembly has done with those paid DLCs is they focused on making unique campaign mechanics for those specific campaigns, not fixing the race as a whole. So you look at the Horde army that Nakai has, you look at the sacrifices that Tenuin has, you look at Oxyatel's teleportation and camps, as well as missions. That's what they focused on with those DLCs in the past. Because the Lizardmen are playable, they're just not really a whole lot of fun. And they're also very slow to progress on the campaign map, which is actually quite important, because being able to build a vast and powerful empire with a powerful economy is quite crucial in Immortal Empires. Having a slow campaign just doesn't work quite as well, especially on higher difficulties in the context of Immortal Empires, partly because you need to prepare for the endgame crisis if you're going to use it, and also because if you let the AI run rampant, they're just going to end up annihilating you, or you'll end up fighting multiple factions at the same time with very limited resources. And this is the problem the Lizardmen do face. Their economy is solid enough, being able to generate from 200 at tier 1 all the way to 400, and they can also get economic modifiers, so they can get the lodestone, which gives them an income from all buildings plus 8%. This does sound great, also combined with the fact that their resource buildings can generate a pretty decent amount of resources and income. But what's the problem? Well, the Lizardmen are just a very slow progressing race. You look at the races that are the strongest in game, be it Chaos Dwarves, Warriors of Chaos, High Elves, Dark Elves, Greenskins, etc. You see races that are able to achieve a lot in a very short period of time. This is simply not the case with the Lizardmen. Now, this is also a similar situation that the Dwarves do have, but unlike the Dwarves, the Lizardmen can actually end up being pretty good, even if they're still going to end up being fairly boring to play. But here are some of the issues. So their economy, if we look, and let me just try and find a settlement that doesn't have an economic building, assuming I do have one. I do actually have one over here. If we look at their settlement, you're looking at 500 for 200 income. That is pretty decent, though the Greenskins can do better. But then you also have to look at the build times for quite a few of these buildings, and it ends up being quite very significant, like 6 turns for a tier 3 provincial capital for a minor settlement, 7 turns for tier 4, 8 turns. So it takes time to build their structures, it takes time to grow as well. Their growth isn't the worst in the game. In fact, it's on that level of being decent, but it is certainly not on a similar level to the Greenskins or what Skaven can achieve. And you will be fighting quite a few Skaven and Lizardmen campaigns, so that's what you're competing against. It's not just like, oh, how is a race in isolation? It's like, what is a race going to be dealing with in a campaign? Well, you're going to be dealing with races that by default can grow faster, they can build their structures faster, they can grow their settlements faster, they can get their income faster than you can, and you're competing against that. And that's just on a baseline difficulty level, and that's not including the fact that AI also, on top of that, gets an extra growth benefit when we're looking at difficulty settings. So it ends up being pretty damned ridiculous. Maybe in the future, because Creative Assembly has talked about how they're going to allow us to customize difficulty, maybe in the future we can remove all those kind of lovely benefits like, free growth for the AI, because I think it ends up being pretty ridiculous, or the free casualty replenishment. Maybe that could do a lot to end up balancing things out. Another issue for the Lizardmen is how their hero capacity works. So in order to get hero capacity for Skink Chiefs, which are your replenishment heroes, you need a tier 3 settlement. Now this isn't too bad for many races, but it actually ends up being relatively bad for the Lizardmen, because it can take you a good amount of time to get those settlements to tier 3. You're going to be lacking on money for these structures. Also, these structures, by the way, can be pretty damn expensive. And the Lizardmen, their economy is not necessarily going to be able to keep up with what they're building. And on top of that, the Lizardmen don't necessarily gain the best income from looting and sacking settlements. Like, it's that situation where they're okay, but they're not great. And as a result of that, they just fall behind compared to other races. Like, they're really middle of their own road race overall, regardless of how well you play them. So, Skink Chiefs, they require tier 3 settlement in order to increase capacity. Saurus Scar Veterans require tier 4 to increase their capacity. Skink Oracles and Skink Priests require tier 5 to increase capacity. And that means that they'll be running around with less heroes. It will be difficult to get them in the first place. It'll be difficult to mass them. And on top of that, because their economy is limited, it also limits your playstyle. See, there's some fun units you could have in a Lizardmen campaign. Like, you could go with the dinosaurs. I mean, who doesn't want to potentially get the stack of Carnosaurs and Dreadsaurians, right? But you look at the cost of these units, 775 for a Dreadsaurian. Yeah, you're probably not going to be able to get that. Assuming you even want to get that kind of building. I mean, it does give you post-battle loot, which is something the Lizardmen do need in order to compete with other races. Also, they can generate trade resources, but it's through the dino building, not through a pure economic building. So really, what you're going to be doing in a Lizardmen campaign is you're not going to play with anything other than Skinks and Saurus for the vast majority of it. Later on, you can obviously diversify your armies with Regiments of Renown and Blessed units, but you're not going to go out of your way to get the Dino buildings or to get the Dreadsaurus buildings or anything like that. You're going to focus on Saurus. You're going to have limited building slots because it takes so long to build up your settlements. And it's just a smarter decision to focus on Saurus. And it's not like Saurus themselves are cheap. They're pretty decent. They have a good amount of armor. They have a great amount of leadership. So they're pretty good and auto-resolve. Skinks, not necessarily so great. They do work, obviously, for Oxyotl in particular. But if you're anyone else, it's not really worth investing in too many Skinks. But they can provide a decent level of support. But also the building does allow you to recruit Croxigars and Sacred Croxigars. Also, an annoying factor is that for Sacred Croxigars, as well as for other units, you do need certain buildings in order to get them. So if you want Temple Guards, if you want Sacred Croxigars, you're going to need to get the Weapon Crafters Commune. Yay, lovely to get the Blacksmith. You probably would want this anyway for the local recruitment and recruit rank, but still. Lizardmen can benefit quite a bit because of the buildings and research in terms of being able to recruit armies that are of a high rank, but they're just going to have fewer armies than other factions. Like over here, it's a campaign at turn 49. I have a vast array of territory, and I have over here, I have 4 main armies that I've been fighting across here, and I'm building a 5th one over here and 6th one, well, just an emergency recruitment army over here because Kairos has decided to pay a visit. But this is turn 49. With other races that have much better economy, this is what it translates into. With other races that have better economy or get better post-battle loot, or both, you would just be able to maintain far more armies and more powerful armies as well, at the same time with more heroes. I mean, the hero situation is improving in my case over here, but still. On top of that, because you're always going to want to get Saurus, what this really means as well is that your lore choices are going to also be limited. Because yes, you do have 4 lore choices. One is going to be limited because you do need to do a rite every 10 turns in order to increase capacity, but you're not going to give a shit about Slan Mate Priests, or Croxigar Agents, or Requested Skinks, or Sars Old Blood. Sorry, you are going to care about Sars Old Blood, but you're not going to care about the 3 others. Because the only hero that is worth recruiting isn't something like a Croxigar, unless you just want to use the power that a Croxigar Ancient does have in battle, because he's a big, powerful guy. But what you're really going to want to do for the vast majority of your armies is get Saurus Old Blood. Why is that? Well, because Saurus Old Blood get these various blessings. But with these blessings, it feels like it's a choice. In reality, it isn't a choice, because you get the blessing of Quetzal, which gives you a minus 20% upkeep for Saurus Infantry and Temple Guard unit, which are going to be the mainstay units of your army. So, if you want to maintain some pretty powerful and relatively cheap, quote-unquote cheap, armies, then you're really going to want to go for the Blessing of Quetzal for that 20% upkeep benefit that you do have for Saurus. It is quite important. It means that in terms of lords, you do have choices, but they're meaningless choices, unless you decide to make, I don't know, a Croxigar army or something along those lines for your faction. So it ends up feeling boring. Furthermore, the jungle, one of the things to mention about the jungle for the Lizardmen, the jungle is really slow to navigate. This is a bigger problem than you might realize, because it takes a long time. You're just going to waste a long time in a lot of Lizardmen campaigns just trying to navigate the jungle. Now, it wouldn't make sense for Bretonia for others, but one of the problems with the Lizardmen is they already have slow growth, a weak income, and then you combine it with the fact that the jungle as a terrain just is slower to navigate than other types of terrain, which further slows down the Lizardmen, because guess what? The vast majority of their campaigns, if not all of them with the exception of Axiatl, are going to be dealing with jungles one way or another. Nakai less so than the others, but still, you are going to be dealing with a lot of jungles. So I think, like, with the Lizardmen, it would just make sense for them to be able to navigate the jungle faster. Because keep in mind, you're going to have limited armies, you're going to have a limited economy, you're going to have a good amount of territory you're going to need to expand across. Having to do that slowly is genuinely going to hurt your campaign in a very significant way. Then there is the research tree. The research tree is bloody awful, to say the least. So, first off, a lot of research requires buildings. This is great, yay! We have to get buildings for research to get the research we want, and we have to get buildings just to get that might unlock a research tree that we don't even necessarily care about. Or we get the building we don't care about to unlock a research that we need. It is a wonderful situation to have to deal with this awful research tree. I mean, it's probably one of the worst research trees in the game. In fact, I would dare say it's worse than the dwarves, because at least the dwarves, the stuff that you're researching with the dwarves is actually useful. Like, minus 5% recruitment costs for skinks is not really a game changer. To recruit rank for SARS, but you have to do that to get that to recruit rank for SARS, which is useful. Or let's say you have a research that gives you an enemy hero action success chance of minus 5%. It reduces hero action success chance. You do have a growth one. Like, there's benefits here. There's useful benefits, really powerful one, even like the sequence of exploitation, for instance. There is some good stuff over here, but there's also a lot of fluff. So this research tree, the way you have to unlock it and the stuff that it gives you isn't really great to have. Like, this research tree really needs an improvement. And unlike, say, the dwarves, who can at least get a very, very high amount of research rate via the archivists and students, which they can get. It is annoying to have to get them to every turn pause your research and then go fight the battles that turn before you end the turn, select whatever you're going to want to research. While that is annoying, at least it works. The Lizardmen don't have that kind of benefit. I mean, they do have heroes that can steal technology, sure, but keep in mind, heroes are limited, and you're going to want to have them in an army. Because, yeah, like, for instance, the hero that can do that, by the way, is the Skink Priest. Enjoy taking your spellcaster, one of the few spellcasters you're going to have, taking that out of your army just to steal technology for a research rate. That is going to be a really fun experience to engage in. And then we have to talk about the unique mechanic that the Lizardmen do have, which is the Geomatic Web. Like, when you look at mechanics, be it the slaves of the Dark Elves, the influence of the High Elves, the food and instant construction of the Skaven related to that, those mechanics have always worked well, one way or another. Sure, there's been downsides with those mechanics, but they do function. When you look at the Geomatic Web improving the strength of your commandments doesn't really feel all that meaningful, does it? Because the benefits you're getting are not really meaningful benefits whatsoever. You can go from strength 1 to strength 2 to strength 5. You need to get buildings for this, I might add, to get the Geomatic Spire in order to take advantage of this. And why in the world would you want to bother with that, right? It isn't really worth. A lot of these buildings, when you're looking at them, they're not really worth it, and just like one that can improve your commandments. Even if you can double the commandments, ultimately, like even if you can gain a major improvement with those commandments, it isn't really a worthwhile thing to do. It's a boring mechanic, it's not a great mechanic, and it can also go very badly because, yeah, you do need these connections between all of your settlements. Also for allies, that does work as well, keep that in mind, but it can certainly be a problem maintaining that connection, improving that connection. It's a system that really needs to take a hike. I feel like the Geomatic Web just doesn't work very well as a system in the game whatsoever. And it never really has. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.